This is lesson 3-4A, where we review adding and subtracting decimals. To begin, you're going to need your study guide and a sharpened pencil. Pause the video and give these 3 problems a try in your study guide. Come on back to compare your answers to mine. In the first problem, I'm asking you to round 24 and 41/100ths to the underlined place. The first 4 is the underlined place, and that is the ones place. When I round to the ones place, I look to the number to the right. The 4 is the number to the right. 4 is not 5 or bigger, and so I'm going to keep the first 4 the same and change the rest of the numbers to zeros, or just leave it 24. In the second problem, you are asked to estimate 5 and 1/100th plus 16 and 32/100ths by rounding before you add or subtract. Show what numbers you use to arrive at your answer. Well, remember, rounding is using rounding rules and rounding both numbers to the same place. In this case, let's round them to the nearest whole number. Oops. That would be the ones place. To round the 5, I look at the 0. The 0 is not 5 or bigger, so I'm going to use the number 5. To round the 6, I look at the number to the right, which is 3. 3 is not 5 or bigger, so I keep the 6 a 6 and change the remaining numbers to 0. 5 plus 16 is 21. You may have selected different numbers than I did. As long as you came to the number close to 21, you probably have it correct. In the next problem, it says to use front-end estimation. Remember, in the previous lesson, we talked about not using front-end estimation and instead rounding to the tenths place. In this problem, to round to the tenths place, that would be the 0. And in this problem, it's the second 2. In the first number, 7 and 4/10ths, the 4 says to round down. So the first one is $7 plus, I look at the 9. The 9 is 5 or bigger, so I need to round that up. So $12.30. When I add $7 plus $12.30, I'm at $19.30. We should all have the exact same number because we are all rounding to the tenths place. All right, that was a review from our previous lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to add and subtract positive and negative decimals. Before we can do that, we need to remind ourselves of what we learned in Chapter 1 this year. In Chapter 1, we learned the following rules for adding and subtracting integers. Remember, integers are positive and negative whole numbers. So adding integers has the same rules when we add and subtract negative decimals. If the signs are the same, we are going to add and keep the signs. If the signs of the two numbers are different, we are going to subtract the two numbers and keep the bigger number. Now, if you're subtracting two numbers, we're going to change all subtraction to adding the opposite and then use these rules for adding. All right, let's apply that. Adding and subtracting decimals. Remember, in 6th grade, you learned that to add and subtract decimals, you line up the decimal points and then add zeros as placeholders where needed. If you need to go back or pause the video to get down proper notes, because you maybe don't have one of those rules memorized, please do that now. This first example, I see that I have negative 16 and 75/100ths plus 9 and 8/100ths. I notice that I'm adding and that the sign of the two numbers are different. When I go back to these rules, that means I am falling under this one, different signs. Subtract and use the sign of the bigger number. So I'm going to put the bigger number on top when I stack them, even though it's negative. So really it's the bigger absolute value. And then I'm going to subtract 9 and 8/100. 5 minus 8, I can't do it. I need to borrow. 15 minus 8 is 3. 6 minus 0 is 6. The decimal point comes straight down. 6 minus 9, I can't do it. I need to borrow. 16 minus 9 is 7. 7 and 63/100 is my answer, but now I need to determine if the answer should be positive or negative. I went more negative than positive, so I give the sign of the bigger absolute value, negative 7 and 63/100. Okay, here's another example. In this example, negative 24 and 25/100 plus 17 and 6/10. Again, I notice I'm adding, and I have different signs of my numbers. So again, I subtract the two numbers and give the sign of the bigger absolute value. So I'm going to do a side problem over here where I stack them, placing the larger value on the top. In the second one, do you see I need to place a 0 as a placeholder? And my decimals are lined up. 5 minus 0 is 5. 2 minus 6, I can't do it. I need to borrow. 12 minus 6 is 6. 3 minus 7, I can't do it. I need to borrow. 13 minus 7 is 6. 1 minus 1 is 0. My answer is 6 and 65/100. Then I look at my two numbers. 24 and 25/100 has a larger absolute value than 17 and 6/10. And so my answer gets the sign of a negative number. So that is my answer. These are two examples of subtraction. Some of you might prefer to just change subtraction to adding the opposite by rewriting negative 3 and 66/100 plus, then the opposite of this is negative 7 and 934/100. Others of you might prefer to squeeze in plus negative 7 and 934 thousandths. Either way is fine. Now we're back to the adding rules, and I'm adding two numbers that have the same sign. Notice they're both negative. So the rule is, when I look back, same sign, add the two numbers and keep the sign. So let's go back here. I'm going to do a side problem. 366 plus 7 and 934 thousandths. I need to add a placeholder. 4 plus 0 is 4. 6 plus 4 is 9. 6 plus 9 is 15. Carry the 1. 7 plus 3 is 10. Plus 1 is 11. Then I keep the sign, which is negative. 11 and 594 thousandths. Okay, this next example is also a subtraction problem, but remember when you have a double negative that becomes a super positive, or you look at it as adding the opposite. Adding the opposite of negative 129 and 18/100 is positive 129 and 18/100. You will be using these rules for adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers all year. They aren't going away, so make sure you commit this to memory. If this is a struggle for you, I encourage you to go back and do the lesson video for 1.5 and 1.6 over again. Now you can see that you can simply add these two numbers. So let's stack them, 389 and 5/10 plus 129 and 18/100. I need to add a 0 in here as a placeholder. Notice my decimal points are lined up. And now I add. 8 plus 0 is 8. 5 plus 1 is 6. 9 plus 9 is 18. 8 plus 2 plus 1 is 11. 3 plus 1 plus 1 is 5. And both of these numbers are positive, so my answer maintains positive. 518 and 68 hundredths. Please pause the video and give this one a try. If you feel like you're doing all right, we'll let you get started on your homework. So pause the video first and try it. All right, hopefully you gave this one a try. I see that I'm adding, and the two numbers have different signs. The first one is positive, the second one is negative. The rule is that when you're adding and the numbers have different signs, to subtract. I put the larger absolute value number on the top and the lower absolute value number in the bottom. I use a placeholder. 0 minus 5 I cannot do. I need to borrow. And so I get 10 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 2 is 2. Bring my decimal point straight down. 2 minus 0 is 2. Then I ask myself, should my answer be positive or negative 2 and 25 hundredths? Well, this number has the bigger absolute value and is positive, so my answer should be positive. All right, give worksheet 3-4A that practices adding and subtracting positive and negative decimals a try.